In the unforgiving world of military training, where discipline meets human nature, some lessons are learned the hard way. What happens when authority crosses the line and underestimates the strength of those it seeks to intimidate? This is the story of Corporal Maria Santos, a young woman who refused to be broken by a system designed to test her limits, and Sergeant Rick Morrison, a man whose abuse of power would cost him everything. In a mess hall filled with witnesses, a moment of violence would change both their lives forever, proving that sometimes justice comes not from the chain of command, but from the courage to stand up when standing up seems impossible. The morning sun cast long shadows across Fort Harrison's training grounds as Corporal Maria Santos adjusted her gear one final time. After 18 months of grueling preparation, she was 3 weeks away from completing the most challenging military program in the country. The Advanced Combat Training Initiative was designed to push soldiers beyond their physical and mental limits, creating elite fighters capable of handling any situation. Out of the original 120 recruits, only 37 remained. Maria had earned her place through sheer determination and skill. Born in East Los Angeles to immigrant parents, she had grown up watching her father work 2 jobs while her mother cleaned office buildings at night. They had sacrificed everything to give their children opportunities they never had. When Maria announced her intention to join the military, her father had worried about the dangers, but her mother had smiled with pride. She knew her daughter possessed something special, an unbreakable spirit that would carry her through any challenge.
The training facility buzzed with activity as recruits prepared for another day of intensive exercises.
Maria moved with purpose through the barracks, her movements precise and confident.
She had learned early that hesitation was a luxury she could not afford. Her bunk was perfectly made, her equipment maintained with meticulous care, and her focus unwavering. The other recruits respected her, not just for her abilities, but for her character. She never complained, never made excuses, and never left anyone behind during team exercises. Sergeant Rick Morrison watched from across the training yard, his eyes following Maria's every movement. At 42 years old, Morrison had been in the military for over 20 years, but his career had stagnated. While his peers advanced to higher ranks and better positions, Morrison remained stuck in his current role, training recruits who often surpassed him in skill and dedication. The sight of successful soldiers, especially women succeeding in what he considered a man's world, filled him with a bitter resentment that he struggled to control. Morrison had noticed Maria from her first day at Fort Harrison. She was everything he was not: disciplined, respected, and genuinely skilled. Her presence reminded him of his own failures, his own mediocrity, and his growing irrelevance in a military that was evolving beyond his understanding. He had initially tried to break her spirit through legitimate means, assigning her extra duties, scrutinizing her performance with excessive attention, and creating obstacles that would challenge even the most determined recruit. But Maria had not just overcome these challenges, she had excelled despite them. As the weeks passed, Morrison's behavior became increasingly concerning. He would find reasons to isolate Maria from the group, subjecting her to verbal harassment disguised as military discipline. His comments became more personal, more targeted, crossing lines that even the most demanding instructors would not cross. He questioned her motivation, her competence, and her right to be there. When other sergeants were present, he maintained a facade of professional behavior, but when alone with Maria, his true nature emerged. The other recruits began to notice the pattern. James Williams, a former college football player from Texas, had tried to intervene subtly, ensuring he was present whenever Morrison approached Maria. Sarah Chen, a brilliant strategist who had graduated from West Point, documented instances of harassment in her personal journal. Unsure of how to proceed through official channels, the group had formed a protective network around Maria, but they all knew their options were limited within the rigid hierarchy of military training. Maria herself recognized what was happening, but chose to endure rather than report. She understood that filing a complaint could potentially derail her career before it truly began. She had worked too hard and sacrificed too much to let Morrison's petty cruelty destroy her dreams. Instead, she focused on excellence, believing that her performance would speak louder than any accusation she might make. She trained harder, studied longer, and pushed herself to levels that impressed even her most demanding instructors. The tension reached a breaking point during a particularly challenging field exercise. Morrison had assigned Maria to lead a simulated rescue mission under impossible conditions, hoping to engineer her failure. The scenario required precise coordination, quick decision-making, and physical endurance that would test even the most experienced soldiers. Morrison watched with anticipation as Maria assessed the situation, organized her team, and began executing a plan that demonstrated tactical brilliance beyond her years. As Maria's team successfully navigated obstacle after obstacle, Morrison's frustration grew visible. He began questioning her decisions over the radio, countermanding her orders, and creating confusion that endangered the entire exercise. The other instructors exchanged concerned glances as they witnessed behavior that clearly violated professional standards. Captain Jennifer Hayes, the commanding officer overseeing the exercise, made notes that would later become crucial to understanding the events that followed. Despite Morrison's interference, Maria's team completed the mission successfully, earning praise from multiple instructors and respect from fellow recruits. As they returned to base, Morrison's anger was palpable. He walked behind the group, muttering complaints and criticisms that anyone could hear. His professional facade had begun to crack under the pressure of witnessing competence that exceeded his own. That evening, as recruits gathered in the mess hall for dinner, the atmosphere was charged with unspoken tension. Word of the day's events had spread throughout the training facility. Some instructors questioned Morrison's conduct privately, while others chose to remain silent, unwilling to challenge a colleague despite obvious concerns. The recruits ate their meals in relative quiet, sensing that something significant was building toward an inevitable confrontation. Maria sat with her usual group, discussing the day's lessons and preparing for upcoming challenges. She had learned to compartmentalize Morrison's harassment, focusing instead on the support of her peers and the progress she was making toward her goals. She talked about her plans after graduation, her hope to serve in combat zones where she could make a real difference, and her determination to prove that women belonged in elite military roles. Her passion was infectious, inspiring others to push beyond their own perceived limitations.
Morrison entered the mess hall 20 minutes after the recruits had begun eating.
His uniform was slightly disheveled, and those close enough could detect the faint smell of alcohol on his breath. He had spent the afternoon drinking alone in his quarters, replaying the day's events and building his resentment into something approaching rage. He moved through the mess hall like a predator stalking prey, his eyes fixed on Maria's table with an intensity that made several recruits uncomfortable. The room gradually fell silent as Morrison approached Maria's group. Conversation stopped mid-sentence as everyone recognized the dangerous shift in atmosphere. Maria looked up from her meal, her expression calm but alert. She had faced Morrison's anger before, but something about this moment felt different, more volatile. The other recruits at her table instinctively tensed, ready to support their friend if necessary. Morrison stood behind Maria's chair close enough that she could feel his presence without turning around. He began speaking in a voice loud enough for the entire mess hall to hear, questioning her leadership during the exercise, criticizing her decisions, and making personal attacks that had nothing to do with military performance. His words were designed to humiliate, to break her spirit in front of her peers, to establish his dominance through public degradation. Maria remained seated, her back straight, her hands steady as she continued eating. She had learned that responding to Morrison's provocations only escalated the situation. She focused on maintaining her composure, refusing to give him the reaction he desperately wanted. Her calm response only intensified Morrison's fury, driving him toward the precipice of an action that would change everything. The mess hall had become completely silent, except for Morrison's increasingly aggressive tirade. Other instructors present should have intervened, but shock and uncertainty paralyzed them. They were witnessing the breakdown of a colleague, watching years of military discipline dissolve under the weight of personal demons and professional inadequacy. The moment stretched taut with possibility, balanced on the edge of violence that everyone could sense approaching. Morrison's verbal assault continued for several minutes, each word more vicious than the last. He questioned Maria's intelligence, her dedication, her right to wear the uniform. He suggested that she was weak, that she did not belong, that she was taking a spot that should have gone to a more deserving candidate. His voice grew louder, his posture more aggressive, his proximity to Maria increasingly threatening. The other recruits watched in horror and fascination as their respected leader endured an attack that violated every principle of military professionalism. They wanted to intervene, but they also understood the potential consequences of challenging the superior officer. The military hierarchy was not designed to protect subordinates from abuse by those in authority, especially when that abuse could be disguised as legitimate discipline. Maria finished her meal slowly, methodically, never acknowledging Morrison's presence with word or gesture. Her composure was absolute, her dignity intact despite the sustained assault on her character and competence. She had faced prejudice and discrimination throughout her life, and she had learned that the most powerful response was often no response at all. She would not give Morrison the satisfaction of seeing her break. As Maria stood to leave, Morrison's rage reached its peak.
And he's
bad. The sight of her walking away, unmoved by his attempts to humiliate her, triggered something primal and uncontrollable. In that moment, 20 years of military training, professional standards, and basic human decency evaporated. He was no longer Sergeant Morrison, instructor and leader. He was simply a bitter man whose authority had been challenged by someone he considered beneath him. The mess hall held its collective breath as Morrison raised his hand, his intention clear to everyone present. What happened next would be remembered by every witness for the rest of their lives, a moment when years of built-up tension exploded into violence that would forever change the trajectory of two military careers. Time seemed to slow as Morrison's hand descended toward Maria's face. The fluorescent lights of the mess hall cast harsh shadows across his twisted features, revealing a man consumed by rage and years of accumulated bitterness. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the sound of chairs scraping against the floor, as several recruits instinctively began to rise from their seats. Maria's reflexes, honed by months of intensive combat training, kicked in with lightning precision. She had been trained to recognize threats, to assess danger in split seconds, and to respond with appropriate force. As Morrison's hand approached her, she ducked smoothly to her left while simultaneously stepping backward. The movement was so fluid, so perfectly executed, that it appeared almost choreographed. Morrison's strike met only empty air where Maria's head had been a fraction of a second earlier. The force of his missed blow, combined with his forward momentum, sent him stumbling off balance. His face registered shock and confusion as he realized his attack had failed completely. The rage that had driven him to this moment was now mixed with the humiliation of being outmaneuvered by the very person he had sought to dominate. What happened next unfolded in a sequence of movements that would be analyzed and discussed for months to come. As Morrison struggled to regain his balance, Maria's training took over completely. She recognized that he was not finished, that his initial failure would only increase his aggression. Her defensive posture shifted subtly as she prepared for what would inevitably follow. Morrison, now completely beyond rational thought, lunged forward again. This time, his intention was not just to strike, but to physically overpower Maria through sheer size and strength. At 6'2" and weighing over 200 pounds, he had always relied on intimidation and physical presence to maintain control. He assumed that Maria, despite her training, would be easily overwhelmed by his superior size. He could not have been more wrong. Maria's response was a masterpiece of defensive tactics combined with precision striking. As Morrison charged forward, she sidestepped his advance while simultaneously delivering a sharp elbow strike to his solar plexus. The blow was calculated not to cause permanent damage, but to neutralize the immediate threat. The impact drove the air from Morrison's lungs and sent shooting pain through his nervous system. The mess hall erupted as Morrison doubled over, gasping for breath and clutching his chest. Recruits jumped to their feet, some moving closer to get a better view, others backing away in shock. The two instructors present finally snapped out of their paralysis and began moving toward the altercation, though their responses were confused and uncertain. Morrison, despite his pain, was not finished. Years of resentment and the humiliation of being bested by someone he considered inferior drove him to continue the assault. He straightened up, his face red with exertion and fury, and made one final, desperate attempt to assert his dominance. This time, he reached for Maria's arm, intending to grab her and demonstrate his physical superiority. It was the last mistake he would make that day. Maria's second defensive move was even more impressive than the first. As Morrison's hand reached for her arm, she caught his wrist in a grip that immediately reversed the power dynamic. Her training in close-quarters combat had taught her to use an opponent's momentum and aggression against them. Morrison suddenly found himself in a position where his own force was being redirected in ways he could not control. The joint lock Maria applied was textbook perfect. She twisted Morrison's wrist while applying pressure to his elbow, creating a combination of pain and mechanical disadvantage that instantly neutralized his ability to continue the attack. Morrison's eyes widened as he realized he was completely helpless, held in place by someone nearly 50 pounds lighter than himself. But Maria was not finished. Her training had taught her that neutralizing a threat required ensuring it could not resume. With Morrison trapped in the joint lock, she applied additional pressure while simultaneously using her leg to sweep his feet from under him. The combination of techniques sent Morrison crashing to the floor with a resounding impact that echoed through the mess hall. Morrison's head struck the concrete floor with a sickening thud that made several witnesses wince. The sound reverberated through the suddenly quiet space, followed by an eerie silence as everyone processed what they had just witnessed. Morrison lay motionless, his body sprawled awkwardly on the mess hall floor, unconscious from the impact. Maria stood over Morrison's unconscious form, her breathing controlled and her posture alert. Despite the adrenaline coursing through her system, she maintained complete composure. She checked Morrison's pulse and breathing, ensuring that while he was unconscious, he was not seriously injured. Her first aid training kicked in automatically as she assessed his condition and confirmed he was stable. The mess hall exploded into activity as the reality of the situation sank in. Recruits began talking excitedly, some expressing amazement at Maria's defensive skills, others worrying about the potential consequences of what had transpired. The two instructors finally reached the scene, both looking stunned and uncertain about how to proceed. Captain Jennifer Hayes, who had been reviewing reports in her office, heard the commotion and arrived within minutes. As the commanding officer responsible for the training program, she immediately took control of the situation. Her first priority was ensuring that Morrison received appropriate medical attention, even though his injuries appeared minor. She called for medics while simultaneously beginning the process of documenting what had occurred. Maria remained calm and cooperative as Captain Hayes began her preliminary investigation. She provided a clear, factual account of the events, describing Morrison's verbal harassment, his physical assault, and her defensive response. Her military bearing and professional demeanor impressed the captain, who had already heard concerns about Morrison's conduct from other instructors. The medics arrived quickly and began examining Morrison, who was beginning to regain consciousness. As he stirred, his first reaction was confusion, followed quickly by rage as he remembered what had happened. He attempted to get up and continue the confrontation, but the medics and Captain Hayes firmly restrained him, making it clear that any further aggressive behavior would result in immediate disciplinary action. Word of the incident spread through Fort Harrison with remarkable speed. Within an hour, soldiers throughout the base had heard various versions of the story. The basic facts remained consistent. Sergeant Morrison had physically attacked Corporal Santos in the mess hall, and she had defended herself so effectively that Morrison ended up unconscious on the floor. The reactions varied dramatically depending on who was telling or hearing the story. Many celebrated Maria's success in defending herself against an abusive superior officer. They saw her actions as justified and impressive proof that training and skill could overcome size and authority when necessary. Others worried about the implications of a recruit striking a sergeant regardless of the circumstances. Colonel Michael Patterson, the base commander, was briefed on the incident within 2 hours. As a career military officer with over 30 years of experience, he understood immediately that this situation required careful handling. The military's reputation for protecting its soldiers, maintaining discipline, and upholding professional standards was at stake. Patterson ordered a comprehensive investigation into both the immediate incident and Morrison's overall conduct as an instructor. He recognized that while Maria's actions appeared justified, the larger question of Morrison's fitness for his position needed to be addressed thoroughly. Reports of his inappropriate behavior with female recruits had been circulating informally for months, but no formal complaints had been filed. Morrison was taken to the base hospital for a complete medical evaluation. The examination revealed a mild concussion and bruised ribs, injuries that would require a few days of rest but posed no long-term health risks. However, his emotional state was more concerning. He alternated between rage at being humiliated by Maria and denial that he had done anything wrong. During his first interview with military police, Morrison claimed that Maria had attacked him without provocation. He insisted that he had been conducting legitimate military discipline when she suddenly became violent. His version of events contradicted the accounts of over 30 witnesses, but he maintained his story with desperate conviction. The investigation that followed was thorough and professional. Captain Hayes interviewed every witness individually, collecting detailed statements about both the immediate incident and Morrison's pattern of behavior toward Maria and other female recruits. The consistency of the accounts was remarkable, with witness after witness describing Morrison's escalating harassment and Maria's professional response to his provocation. The most damaging testimony came from Morrison's fellow instructors, who admitted they had been aware of his inappropriate conduct but had failed to address it properly. Their statements revealed a culture of willful blindness to harassment, where obvious problems were ignored as long as they did not directly impact operations. Maria's fellow recruits provided overwhelming support for her account of events. They described months of witnessing Morrison's targeted harassment, his attempts to isolate and intimidate Maria, and the professional way she had handled the situation. Several noted that they had wanted to intervene earlier, but had been uncertain about proper procedures for reporting instructor misconduct. The physical evidence supported Maria's version of events completely. The positioning of Morrison's body, the witness accounts of the defensive moves Maria had used, and the nature of his injuries all confirmed that she had responded to his attack rather than initiating violence. Security cameras in the mess hall had captured portions of the incident, providing visual confirmation of the witness testimony. As the investigation progressed, additional information about Morrison's background emerged. His service record revealed a pattern of complaints from female soldiers under his command dating back several years. While none of these complaints had resulted in formal disciplinary action, they painted a picture of an instructor who consistently crossed professional boundaries. The discovery of Morrison's drinking problem added another dimension to the investigation. Fellow instructors admitted they had smelled alcohol on his breath on several occasions, including the day of the incident. His quarters yielded evidence of regular heavy drinking, suggesting that alcohol may have contributed to his increasingly erratic behavior. Maria continued her training schedule throughout the investigation, though she was temporarily reassigned to different instructors. Her performance remained exemplary, and her fellow recruits continued to show her strong support. The incident, rather than damaging her reputation, had enhanced her standing among both peers and instructors who admired her composure under pressure. The broader implications of the incident extended far beyond Fort Harrison. News of a female recruit successfully defending herself against an abusive male instructor spread throughout the military community, sparking discussions about harassment, accountability, and the changing nature of military service. Some viewed Maria as a hero who had stood up to institutional bullying, while others worried about the precedent of subordinates using force against superior officers. 3 days after the incident, Morrison was formally relieved of his duties pending the completion of the investigation. His access to the base was restricted, and he was ordered to undergo psychological evaluation and substance abuse counseling. The once powerful instructor who had terrorized recruits with impunity found himself isolated and facing the potential end of his military career. The speed and thoroughness of the military's response sent a clear message throughout Fort Harrison and beyond. Harassment and abuse of power would not be tolerated, regardless of rank or seniority. The case became a turning point in how the military addressed misconduct by instructors, establishing new protocols for reporting and investigating such incidents. As the investigation moved towards its conclusion, it became clear that Morrison's fate was sealed. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and the military could not ignore such a clear violation of professional standards. The only remaining questions were the specific charges he would face and the nature of his discharge from service. The formal investigation into Sergeant Morrison's conduct concluded 2 weeks after the mess hall incident, delivering findings that would reshape policies throughout the military training system. Colonel Patterson convened a formal hearing to review the evidence and determine appropriate disciplinary action. The proceedings were conducted with the gravity befitting a case that had attracted attention from the highest levels of military command. Morrison's defense team, provided by the military justice system, attempted to portray their client as a dedicated soldier whose methods, while perhaps harsh, were within the bounds of traditional military discipline. They argued that Maria had overreacted to what amounted to standard instructor behavior and that her response was disproportionate to any perceived threat. This defense strategy collapsed immediately when confronted with the overwhelming evidence compiled during the investigation. Video footage clearly showed Morrison's aggressive approach and initial strike attempt, while witness testimony from over 30 soldiers painted a detailed picture of systematic harassment that had escalated over months. The defense team's attempts to minimize Morrison's actions only served to highlight the severity of his conduct. Maria testified with the same composure and professionalism she had displayed throughout the ordeal. She provided clear, factual accounts of Morrison's behavior, describing specific incidents of harassment, intimidation, and inappropriate conduct. Her testimony was devastating in its detail and credibility, delivered without emotion or apparent desire for revenge. When asked why she had not reported Morrison's harassment earlier, Maria's response resonated throughout the hearing room. She explained that she had believed her performance would speak for itself, that excellence would overcome prejudice, and that filing complaints might damage her career prospects. Her words highlighted the difficult position faced by soldiers who experienced harassment from superior officers. The hearing revealed the broader institutional failures that had allowed Morrison's conduct to continue unchecked. Fellow instructors testified about their awareness of his inappropriate behavior but their reluctance to intervene or report their concerns. Their testimony exposed a culture where obvious misconduct was tolerated as long as it did not directly disrupt operations. Captain Hayes provided particularly damning testimony about the warnings she had given Morrison regarding his conduct toward female recruits. She described multiple conversations where she had counseled him about maintaining professional boundaries, warnings that he had apparently ignored or dismissed. Her documented attempts to address the problem demonstrated that the military hierarchy had been aware of the issues but had failed to take decisive action. The psychological evaluation ordered for Morrison revealed troubling aspects of his mental state and fitness for military service. The evaluation found evidence of alcohol dependency, anger management issues, and deep-seated resentments that made him unsuitable for positions involving authority over subordinate personnel. The psychologist's report recommended immediate removal from training duties and comprehensive treatment for his underlying problems. Morrison's own testimony was perhaps the most damaging element of his defense. Despite overwhelming evidence and advice from his legal team, he maintained his innocence and continued to blame Maria for the confrontation. His testimony revealed a man unable to accept responsibility for his actions, someone whose judgment had been compromised by personal demons and professional failures. The hearing concluded with unanimous findings that Morrison had violated multiple articles of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, including assault, conduct unbecoming an officer, and failure to maintain professional standards. The panel recommended his immediate dismissal from service with forfeiture of benefits, a sentence that would effectively end his military career and impact his civilian prospects. Colonel Patterson announced the findings publicly, using the occasion to reinforce the military's commitment to maintaining professional standards and protecting all service members from harassment and abuse. His statement emphasized that rank and seniority would never excuse violations of basic human dignity and professional conduct. The aftermath of Morrison's dismissal sent ripples throughout the military training establishment. His case became a cautionary tale used in leadership courses, a stark reminder of how personal problems and poor judgment could destroy careers built over decades. The incident prompted comprehensive reviews of instructor selection and oversight procedures at training facilities across all branches of service. For Maria, the conclusion of the investigation marked the beginning of a new phase in her military career. Rather than being damaged by the incident, her stock had risen considerably within the military hierarchy. Her composure under pressure, combined with her demonstrated defensive skills, had impressed senior officers who recognized her potential for leadership roles. The remaining 3 weeks of Maria's training program passed without major incident. Morrison's replacement, Sergeant First Class Linda Rodriguez, brought a completely different approach to instruction that emphasized mentorship and professional development rather than intimidation and harassment. The training environment became more positive and productive, with recruits feeling safe to ask questions and seek guidance without fear of retribution. Maria's fellow recruits treated her with a mixture of respect and admiration that reflected their appreciation for her courage in standing up to Morrison's abuse. Many privately thanked her for enduring his harassment rather than dropping out of the program, recognizing that his behavior might have driven them away from military service entirely. The graduation ceremony for Maria's training class took place on a crisp October morning, with families and military dignitaries in attendance. Maria's parents had traveled from Los Angeles to witness their daughter's achievement, their pride evident as they watched her receive recognition for outstanding performance throughout the program. General Sarah Mitchell, the commanding general responsible for all advanced combat training programs, delivered the graduation address. She spoke directly about the importance of maintaining professional standards and protecting the dignity of all service members. Using Morrison's case as an example of what the military would not tolerate, Maria graduated second in her class, earning commendations for leadership, tactical excellence, and professional conduct under adverse conditions. Her achievement was particularly meaningful given the challenges she had overcome during training. The ranking reflected not just her military skills but her character and resilience in the face of sustained harassment. Following graduation, Maria received multiple assignment offers from units throughout the military. Her reputation had spread far beyond Fort Harrison, and commanding officers wanted soldiers with her combination of skills and demonstrated courage. After careful consideration, she chose an assignment with an elite unit preparing for deployment to a conflict zone, where her training would be put to the ultimate test. Morrison's story took a very different trajectory after his dismissal from military service. The dishonorable discharge made civilian employment difficult, particularly in fields related to security or law enforcement, where background checks would reveal his military record. The man who had once wielded authority over dozens of recruits found himself struggling to find basic employment. His attempts to appeal the discharge were unsuccessful, with military courts upholding the original findings and sentence. The evidence against him was simply too overwhelming, and his behavior during the hearing had reinforced concerns about his judgment and character. His military career, which had once seemed like his greatest achievement, became the source of his greatest shame. The incident at Fort Harrison prompted congressional hearings on harassment in military training programs. Maria was called to testify before a House subcommittee investigating the prevalence of instructor misconduct and the effectiveness of existing reporting procedures. Her testimony was crucial in shaping new legislation designed to protect military personnel from abuse by superior officers. During her congressional testimony, Maria advocated for stronger protections for service members who report harassment, emphasizing the need for independent investigation procedures that could not be influenced by local command structures. Her recommendations helped shape the Military Personnel Protection Act, which created new avenues for reporting misconduct and protecting whistleblowers from retaliation. The changes implemented as a result of Morrison's case extended far beyond Fort Harrison. Training facilities throughout the military adopted new oversight procedures, mandatory counseling for instructors showing signs of inappropriate behavior, and regular evaluations by independent observers. The culture that had allowed Morrison's conduct to continue was systematically dismantled and replaced with systems designed to prevent similar incidents. Maria's first deployment took her to a forward operating base in a region where combat operations were ongoing daily. The skills she had developed during training, combined with the confidence gained from successfully defending herself against Morrison's assault, served her well in the challenging environment. Her unit commander quickly recognized her potential and began grooming her for leadership roles. 6 months into her deployment, Maria was promoted to sergeant, a recognition of her outstanding performance and natural leadership abilities. The promotion ceremony was conducted at the forward operating base, with her unit gathered around as her new rank was pinned to her uniform. Her parents watched via video link, their emotions evident as they witnessed their daughter's continued success. Morrison's story reached its nadir when he was arrested for assault in a civilian setting, demonstrating that his problems with violence and alcohol had not been resolved by his military discharge. The arrest made local news, with reporters noting his military background and the circumstances of his dismissal from service. The incident reinforced perceptions of Morrison as someone whose personal problems had made him a danger to others. The contrast between Maria's and Morrison's post-incident trajectories became a powerful illustration of how character and choices shape destiny. While Maria continued to excel and earn recognition for her service, Morrison struggled with the consequences of his actions and his inability to change his behavior patterns. 2 years after the mess hall incident, Maria was selected for officer candidate school, beginning her journey toward commissioned officer status. The recommendation came from multiple superior officers who had observed her leadership potential and professional excellence. Her acceptance into the program represented another milestone in a career that had overcome significant obstacles. The case study of Morrison's misconduct became required reading in military leadership courses, serving as a stark reminder of how abuse of authority could destroy careers and damage the military's mission effectiveness. His story was used to illustrate the importance of maintaining professional standards, seeking help for personal problems, and treating all personnel with dignity and respect. Maria's success story, meanwhile, became an inspiration for young women considering military careers. Her ability to overcome harassment and excel in a challenging environment demonstrated that determination and skill could triumph over prejudice and abuse. Military recruiters often shared her story with potential recruits, emphasizing the military's commitment to protecting all service members. The institutional changes prompted by the Morrison case continued to evolve and improve over time. Regular surveys of training personnel revealed significant improvements in the reporting of misconduct, with service members expressing greater confidence in the military's willingness to address harassment and abuse. The culture shift was gradual but measurable, creating safer environments for all personnel. As Maria prepared for her next phase of military service, she reflected on the events that had tested her resolve and ultimately strengthened her character. The confrontation with Morrison had been traumatic, but it had also proven to herself and others that she possessed the courage and skill necessary to succeed in military service. Her experience had helped create positive changes that would benefit future generations of service members. 3 years had passed since the infamous mess hall incident at Fort Harrison, and the reverberations from that confrontation continued to shape both Maria's rising career and the military's evolving policies on instructor conduct. The story had become legendary within military circles, often told as an example of how courage and proper training could overcome abuse of authority. Maria stood before the mirror in her quarters at Officer Candidate School, adjusting the collar of her dress uniform. Today marked her commissioning ceremony, the culmination of months of intensive training that would transform her from enlisted personnel to a commissioned officer. The gold bars of a second lieutenant would soon replace her sergeant stripes, representing not just a promotion but a fundamental shift in her military responsibilities. The path to this moment had been challenging but rewarding. Officer Candidate School demanded excellence in leadership, strategy, and character that went far beyond the physical and tactical skills emphasized in enlisted training. Maria had thrived in this environment, her natural leadership abilities and hard-earned wisdom making her a standout candidate among her peers. Her reputation had preceded her to OCS, where instructors and fellow candidates alike knew the story of her confrontation with Morrison. Rather than being a burden, this notoriety had become an asset. Her proven ability to maintain composure under extreme pressure and defend herself when necessary earned her immediate respect from classmates and instructors who valued those qualities in potential officers. Captain Rodriguez, Maria's primary instructor and mentor at OCS, had taken a special interest in her development. A 20-year veteran who had served in multiple combat zones, Rodriguez recognized exceptional leadership potential when she saw it. She had worked closely with Maria to refine her strategic thinking and command presence, preparing her for the responsibilities that would come with commissioned officer status. The commissioning ceremony took place on a bright spring morning, with families and dignitaries gathered to witness the transformation of candidate into officer. Maria's parents sat in the front row, their pride evident as they watched their daughter prepare to take the oath of office. Her father, now retired from his factory job, wore a suit he had purchased specifically for this occasion. General Mitchell, who had spoken at Maria's original graduation from Fort Harrison, delivered the commissioning address. She spoke about the changing nature of military leadership, the importance of maintaining professional standards, and the responsibility of officers to protect and develop the soldiers under their command. Her words carried particular weight given her role in implementing reforms following the Morrison incident. During the individual commissioning process, Maria stepped forward to receive her gold bars and take the oath of office. The words of the oath carried special meaning for someone who had already demonstrated her commitment to defending others and upholding military values. As the general pinned the lieutenant's bars to her uniform, Maria felt the weight of new responsibility settling on her shoulders. Following the ceremony, Maria was assigned to Fort Braxton as a platoon leader in an airborne infantry unit preparing for deployment. The assignment was considered highly desirable, reflecting the military's confidence in her leadership potential and combat readiness. Her new commanding officer, Major James Crawford, had specifically requested her assignment based on her outstanding record and demonstrated leadership capabilities. The transition from enlisted soldier to commissioned officer required significant adjustment in mindset and approach. As a sergeant, Maria had been responsible primarily for her own performance and that of small teams. As a lieutenant, she would be responsible for the lives, training, and welfare of 30 soldiers, each with their own backgrounds, motivations, and challenges. Her first meeting with her new platoon revealed the typical mix of personalities found in any military unit. There were seasoned veterans with multiple deployments, young soldiers fresh from basic training, and everyone in between. Some had heard stories about their new lieutenant and were curious to see if the legends were true. Others remained skeptical about any officer who had not yet proven themselves in combat. Sergeant First Class Thompson, the platoon sergeant who would be Maria's senior enlisted advisor, had 22 years of military experience and had served under dozens of lieutenants. His initial assessment of Maria was cautious but positive, recognizing her technical competence while reserving judgment about her leadership abilities until they were tested under pressure. Maria's approach to leadership emphasized mentorship and professional development rather than mere command and control. She spent time learning about each soldier's background, goals, and challenges, understanding that effective leadership required treating people as individuals rather than interchangeable components. Her own experience with Morrison's destructive leadership style informed her determination to create a positive command climate. The unit's training cycle intensified as their deployment date approached. Maria threw herself into preparing her platoon for the challenges they would face in combat, emphasizing realistic training scenarios that would test their tactical skills and decision-making abilities. Her own combat experience from her previous deployment proved invaluable in designing training that prepared soldiers for actual battlefield conditions. Meanwhile, Morrison's post-military life continued its downward trajectory. His arrest for civilian assault had resulted in a conviction and brief jail sentence, further damaging his employment prospects and personal relationships. The man who had once terrorized military recruits now struggled with basic life skills, his problems with alcohol and anger unresolved despite mandatory counseling. Local news coverage of Morrison's civilian legal troubles inevitably mentioned his military background and the circumstances of his dismissal from service. The contrast between his current situation and Maria's rising career became a stark illustration of how character and choices determine destiny. While she had used adversity as motivation for growth, he had allowed bitterness and resentment to destroy his life. Maria's deployment to Afghanistan came 8 months after her commissioning. leading her platoon into a combat zone where theoretical training would meet harsh reality. The forward operating base where they were stationed was located in a contested region where coalition forces maintained a tenuous hold against persistent insurgent activity. Her first combat operation as a platoon leader took place just 3 weeks into the deployment.
Intelligence had identified a weapons cache hidden in a rural compound, and Maria's platoon was tasked with conducting the raid to secure the materials and apprehend any insurgents present. The operation would test everything she had learned about leadership, tactics, and decision-making under pressure.
The pre-mission briefing revealed the complexity of the situation they faced. The compound was located in a civilian area, requiring careful rules of engagement to avoid innocent casualties.
Intelligence suggested that between 5 and 8 armed insurgents might be present, but uncertainty about their exact numbers and positions made tactical planning challenging. Maria's approach to mission planning demonstrated the leadership lessons she had internalized through her military career.
She involved her squad leaders in developing the tactical approach, recognizing that their experience and insights would improve the plan's effectiveness. She emphasized contingency planning and clear communication protocols that would allow the platoon to adapt if the situation changed during the operation. The night before the mission, Maria conducted final checks of equipment and personnel, ensuring that every soldier understood their role and responsibilities. Her calm confidence helped settle pre-mission nerves among younger soldiers experiencing their first combat operation, while her attention to detail impressed veterans who had seen too many officers neglect important preparation steps. The operation commenced before dawn, with Maria's platoon moving through the darkness toward their objective.
The approach required careful coordination between multiple elements, including overwatch positions, assault teams, and a support element positioned to block potential escape routes. Maria's command of the tactical situation was evident as she coordinated these moving parts while maintaining situational awareness. Contact with insurgent forces came sooner than expected, when a sentry spotted the advancing soldiers and opened fire. The initial exchange of gunfire lasted only minutes, but it tested every aspect of the platoon's training and Maria's leadership under combat conditions. Her calm voice on the radio helped coordinate the response, while her tactical decisions quickly gained fire superiority over the insurgent position. The successful completion of the mission, with the weapons cache secured and 3 insurgents captured without any coalition casualties, established Maria's reputation as a combat leader who could make sound decisions under pressure. Her after-action report demonstrated analytical thinking that impressed senior officers and contributed to improved tactics for future operations. Word of the successful mission spread quickly through the military grapevine, adding to Maria's growing reputation as an exceptional young officer. The stark contrast between her professional success and Morrison's continued personal failures became even more pronounced, illustrating how the events at Fort Harrison had set 2 individuals on completely different life paths. 6 months into her deployment, Maria was selected for early promotion to first lieutenant, recognition of her outstanding performance and leadership potential. The promotion ceremony, conducted at the forward operating base, was attended by her entire platoon and witnessed via video link by her proud parents back home. During her promotion speech, Maria spoke about the lessons she had learned from every experience in her military career, both positive and negative. She acknowledged that adversity had taught her valuable lessons about resilience, courage, and the importance of standing up for what is right. Her words inspired the soldiers under her command and reinforced her reputation as a leader who led by example. As news of Maria's promotion reached the United States, it was covered by several military publications that highlighted her journey from harassment victim to successful combat leader. The articles emphasized how the military's response to the Morrison incident had created an environment where talented individuals could thrive regardless of the obstacles they faced. The investigation and reforms prompted by Morrison's misconduct continued to yield positive results throughout the military. Annual surveys showed significant improvements in soldiers' confidence in reporting harassment and abuse, while the number of substantiated misconduct cases involving instructors had decreased dramatically. The institutional changes had created lasting improvements in military culture. Morrison's awareness of Maria's continued success, gleaned from occasional news coverage and social media posts, only deepened his bitterness and self-destructive behavior. Rather than using her achievements as inspiration for personal change, he viewed them as evidence that the system had been unfair to him. His inability to accept responsibility for his actions continued to prevent any possibility of redemption or recovery. The contrast between their trajectories served as a powerful reminder that individuals control their responses to adversity regardless of external circumstances. While Maria had channeled negative experiences into motivation for excellence,
Morrison had allowed those same experiences to justify increasingly destructive choices. As Maria's deployment neared its end, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from a young recruit enduring harassment to a proven combat leader respected by superiors and subordinates alike. The confrontation with Morrison, while traumatic at the time, had become a defining moment that revealed her character and set the stage for everything that followed. Her platoon's successful completion of multiple combat missions had earned recognition from Brigade leadership and established her as one of the most promising young officers in her unit. The soldiers under her command had developed fierce loyalty to a leader who cared about their welfare and demonstrated competence under the most challenging conditions. The lessons learned from Maria's experience continued to influence military training and leadership development programs. Her story became required reading in officer development courses, illustrating how proper training, strong character, and institutional support could transform potential victims into empowered leaders capable of creating positive change. 5 years after the confrontation that changed everything, Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos stood before a packed auditorium at the Pentagon, preparing to deliver the keynote address at the annual Military Leadership Conference. Her rapid rise through the ranks had been unprecedented, driven by exceptional performance in combat zones and her innovative approaches to leadership development. The woman who had once endured harassment in a mess hall at Fort Harrison now wore the silver oak leaves of a lieutenant colonel, commanding a battalion of over 600 soldiers. Her journey from enlisted recruit to senior officer had become the stuff of military legend, inspiring countless young service members who faced their own challenges and obstacles. The audience before her included generals, senior enlisted leaders, and rising officers from all branches of the military. They had gathered to discuss the evolving nature of military leadership in the 21st century, and Maria's experience bridged the gap between theoretical concepts and practical application in the most demanding environments. Her speech topic, Leadership Through Adversity, Building Resilience in Modern Military Organizations, drew directly from her personal experiences and the lessons learned throughout her remarkable career. She had been specifically chosen to address this topic because her story exemplified how individuals could transform negative experiences into positive change for entire organizations. As she began speaking, Maria's voice carried the confidence and authority that came from years of successful leadership under the most challenging conditions. Her words resonated with authenticity born from real experience rather than academic theory. She spoke about the importance of maintaining dignity under pressure, the power of proper training and preparation, and the responsibility of leaders to protect those under their command. The audience listened intently as she described the systematic changes that had been implemented following the Morrison incident, changes that had created safer, more professional environments throughout the military training system. She emphasized how individual courage and institutional support had combined to create lasting improvements that benefited thousands of current and future service members. During the question and answer session, a young female captain asked about handling harassment and discrimination in military environments. Maria's response was both practical and inspiring, emphasizing that while reporting misconduct was important, personal excellence and professional competence were equally crucial in overcoming prejudice and bias. Her advice to young officers reflected hard-earned wisdom about leadership, character, and the importance of treating every individual with dignity and respect. She spoke about the responsibility of leaders to create environments where all personnel could thrive, regardless of their background or personal characteristics. Following her Pentagon address, Maria returned to Fort Campbell, where she commanded the 2nd Battalion of the 187th Infantry Regiment. Her unit was considered one of the most elite in the Army, with a deployment schedule that kept them constantly engaged in the most challenging missions around the world. Under her leadership, the battalion had achieved recognition for outstanding performance in multiple deployment cycles, earning commendations for both tactical excellence and low casualty rates. Her approach to command emphasized thorough preparation, innovative tactics, and genuine care for the welfare of her soldiers. The battalion's success reflected Maria's evolution from a young lieutenant learning leadership basics to a seasoned commander capable of managing complex operations involving multiple units and diverse mission requirements. Her experience had taught her that effective leadership required balancing competing demands while never losing sight of the fundamental responsibility to accomplish missions and take care of people. Meanwhile, Morrison's life had reached its lowest point. His third arrest for alcohol-related offences had resulted in a longer jail sentence and mandatory enrolment in a residential treatment program. The man who had once held authority over dozens of military recruits now struggled with basic sobriety and anger management in a civilian facility. His family had largely abandoned him, unable to cope with his continued destructive behavior and unwillingness to accept responsibility for his actions. Former military colleagues avoided contact, embarrassed by his continued legal troubles and the shame his conduct had brought to their shared profession. The contrast between Maria's continued success and Morrison's ongoing failures served as a stark reminder of how character and choices shape destiny. While she had used adversity as motivation for growth and positive change, he had allowed bitterness and resentment to destroy every opportunity for redemption. Local media occasionally covered Morrison's legal troubles, inevitably mentioning his military background and the circumstances of his dismissal from service. These stories served as cautionary tales about the long-term consequences of misconduct and the importance of seeking help for personal problems before they destroy careers and relationships. The institutional changes prompted by Morrison's case had continued to evolve and improve over the years. The Military Personnel Protection Act had been expanded multiple times, creating stronger protections for service members and more effective mechanisms for addressing misconduct. The culture shift that began with his dismissal had transformed how the military approached issues of harassment and abuse of authority. Annual surveys showed continued improvement in service members' confidence in reporting misconduct and their satisfaction with the military's response to complaints. The percentage of cases where corrective action was taken had increased dramatically, while the number of substantiated misconduct cases had decreased significantly. Maria's influence on these positive changes extended beyond her original case. Throughout her career, she had served on multiple committees and boards focused on improving military culture and leadership development. Her insights, grounded in real experience, had helped shape policies that protected vulnerable personnel while maintaining the high standards necessary for military effectiveness. Her success had also inspired a new generation of female military leaders who saw her achievement as proof that gender-based barriers could be overcome through excellence and determination. Military academies and ROTC programs regularly invited her to speak to cadets about leadership and the importance of character in military service. The ripple effects of the Fort Harrison incident had reached far beyond the individuals directly involved. The case had prompted congressional oversight, policy reforms, and cultural changes that improved conditions for thousands of service members. What began as a confrontation in a mess hall had evolved into a catalyst for institutional transformation. At 32 years old, Maria was selected for promotion to full colonel, making her one of the youngest officers to achieve that rank in recent Army history. The promotion ceremony, held at the Pentagon and attended by senior military leaders, marked another milestone in a career that had consistently exceeded expectations. Her promotion orders assigned her to command a brigade of over 3,000 soldiers, a position that would test her leadership abilities at an entirely new level. The assignment came with responsibility for multiple battalions, diverse mission requirements, and the complex logistics of managing a large-scale military organization. The soldiers under Maria's new command came from varied backgrounds and experience levels, from recent recruits to seasoned veterans with decades of service. Her challenge would be creating unity of purpose among these diverse individuals, while maintaining the high standards that had characterized her previous commands. Her approach to brigade command reflected lessons learned throughout her career about the importance of delegation, communication, and trust in effective leadership. She surrounded herself with competent subordinates, clearly communicated her expectations, and trusted her commanders to execute missions according to her intent while adapting to local conditions. The brigade's first major deployment under Maria's command took them to Africa, where they conducted counter-terrorism operations in partnership with local forces. The mission required complex coordination between military units, civilian agencies, and international partners, testing every aspect of Maria's leadership capabilities. The successful completion of the African deployment, with objectives achieved and minimal casualties, further enhanced Maria's reputation as a commander who could manage complex operations while protecting the soldiers under her command. Her innovative approaches to partnership operations became models for similar missions conducted by other units. Recognition of her achievements extended beyond military circles. She received invitations to speak at civilian universities, corporate leadership conferences, and international symposiums on military affairs. Her story resonated with audiences who appreciated examples of individual courage creating positive institutional change. A best-selling book about military leadership featured Maria's story as a central case study in overcoming adversity and creating positive change. The book's success brought her story to civilian audiences who might never have heard about military culture or the challenges faced by service members. Documentary filmmakers approached Maria about creating a film based on her experiences, though she declined most offers, preferring to focus on her military duties rather than celebrity. She remained committed to serving rather than promoting herself, a decision that only enhanced respect for her character and priorities.
Morrison's story took a different turn when he finally reached rock bottom and committed to serious treatment for his alcohol addiction and anger management problems. The residential program he entered emphasized personal responsibility, making amends for past actions, and developing healthier coping mechanisms. His progress was slow and difficult, requiring him to confront years of denial and self-destructive behavior. The process of accepting responsibility for his actions was particularly challenging, as it forced him to acknowledge the harm he had caused to others, especially Maria and the recruits under his command. As part of his recovery program, Morrison was encouraged to write letters of apology to those he had harmed, including Maria. The letter he drafted went through multiple revisions as he struggled to express genuine remorse without making excuses for his behavior. The process of writing the letter forced him to confront the full impact of his actions. Maria received Morrison's letter 6 months after he entered treatment. The letter was brief but appeared sincere, acknowledging his misconduct and expressing genuine remorse for the harm he had caused. He made no requests for forgiveness or response, simply stating his commitment to ensuring he never again harmed others through his actions. Maria chose not to respond to the letter, feeling that her energy was better focused on positive contributions to military service rather than revisiting past trauma. However, she did share the letter with her mentor, Captain Rodriguez, who noted that it represented a significant step in Morrison's recovery process. The military leadership development programs that had been reformed following Morrison's case continued to produce positive results. New instructor selection procedures, enhanced oversight mechanisms, and regular training on professional conduct had created environments where harassment and abuse were far less likely to occur. Maria's brigade was selected to pilot new leadership development programs that emphasized mentorship, character development, and professional ethics alongside traditional military skills. The programs drew on lessons learned from various incidents, including her own experience, to create comprehensive approaches to developing effective leaders. As Maria approached the midpoint of her military career, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from a young recruit enduring harassment to a senior commander responsible for thousands of soldiers. The challenges she had faced had shaped her character and leadership philosophy in ways that benefited everyone under her command. Her story had become proof that individuals could overcome systemic problems through personal excellence while simultaneously working to create positive change for others. The confrontation with Morrison, while traumatic at the time, had ultimately led to improvements that would benefit future generations of military personnel. The legacy of the Fort Harrison incident extended far beyond the individuals involved, creating lasting changes in military culture that promoted professionalism, dignity, and respect for all service members. What began as an abuse of authority had evolved into a catalyst for institutional reform that strengthened the entire military organization. Maria's continued success served as inspiration for countless young service members who faced their own challenges and obstacles. Her story demonstrated that adversity could be transformed into strength, that individual courage could create systemic change, and that character ultimately determined destiny in ways that transcended rank, position, or circumstances.